Inflation in the UK has risen once again in a sign that households will still be struggling with the cost of living crisis for the foreseeable future. The Consumer Price Index rate of inflation for February 2023 increased from 10.1% to 10.4%. Britons have been forced to contend with inflation-hiked prices, soaring energy bills and skyrocketing interest rates amid the rise in the cost of living over the past year. In its announcement today of February's inflation figures, the Office for National Statistics shared the largest upward contributions to inflation came from housing and household services, mainly from electricity, gas, and other fuels. Furthermore, there was a hike in the upward contributions from food and non-alcoholic beverages. Prior to today, experts and economists had predicted that consumer price index inflation would fall to 9.9%. The Bank of England has stated its target is to bring inflation down to 2%, with today's announcement meaning it is more likely further intervention from the central bank is necessary. This represents the first rise in UK inflation in the last 4 months, and is bringing the CPI rate closer to the record 41-year of 11.1% from October 2022. In a bid to mitigate the impact of inflation, the Bank of England has raised interest rates 10 consecutive times in the past year. As it stands, the base rate is at 4%. And the Central Bank's Monetary Policy Committee is due to meet tomorrow to discuss potentially hiking it once again. With inflation rising after 3 previous months of dropping, another interest rate increase seems guaranteed. In reaction to today's news, Alastair Douglas, CEO of Totalemony, said prices are still rising at a rapid rate, albeit a slightly slower one than we've become used to in recent months. At the same time, wages are on the slide, and when adjusted for inflation have fallen by 3.2% since November last year. Put simply, people are taking pay cuts. They're borrowing money to plug this gap. And while last week's budget provides some respite, it doesn't address the issue that nearly 9 million adults are struggling to cover everyday essentials. Even if we do reach the Bank of England's 2% inflation target by autumn, the problem isn't going away. In his spring budget last week, Chancellor Jeremy Hunt cited figures from the Office for Budget Responsibility, which forecast inflation would drop to 2.9% by the end of the year. However, alongside the recent turmoil in the banking sector, questions remain about whether this is at all likely to be a reality. Alice Hain, personal finance analyst at Best Invest, outlined what the increase to consumer price index inflation means for families across the UK. She explained, rising inflation delivers a fresh blow to households that were hoping the financial squeeze was finally starting to ease. It means disposable incomes are still very much under threat. When you consider the additional challenges posed by higher mortgage costs, falling real incomes, looming tax rises, and the prospect that the Bank of England may hike interest rates for the 11th time in a row tomorrow. Dr. George Dibb, head of the Centre for Economic Justice at IPPR, warned today's rate increase will raise more concerns for already struggling households. However, the finance expert highlighted the majority of forecasts suggest the economy will improve by the end of 2023. He said, from an economics perspective, all eyes now turn to tomorrow's announcement from the Bank of England's interest rate setters. Rising core inflation will raise concerns amongst central bankers that inflation is increasingly embedded. However, it's important to note that all the major forecasters are expecting a significant drop in inflation, even deflation, later in the year. Tom Stevenson, Investment Director for Personal Investing at Fidelity International, blamed today's Consumer Price Index inflation rate for February on the economic hangover originating from 2022. Mr. Stevenson explained. Although inflation remains in double digits at 10.4%, it is likely that the trend from here will be sharply lower this year. The Office for Budget Responsibility has penciled in 3% for the end of the year, and less than 1% in 2024, as the year-on-year comparisons become progressively easier. The latest reading for the year to February is a hangover from the past year's energy, fuel and food price hikes, and tells us little about where inflation is heading from here.